All right, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Angela McQuillan and I'm the owner of Chimaera Gallery based in Philadelphia. We recently opened an online exhibition called AI: The Next Evolution, featuring artists from all around the world who are experimenting with artificial intelligence as an artistic medium. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that show in the chat in case you want to check it out. As part of this exhibition, I'm very excited to welcome you to today's talk, where I have the distinct honor of introducing an artist whose innovative work resides at the intersection of art, technology, and biology. Amy Karle is an artist known for being a pioneer in the world of bioart and technology-driven creativity. Her work is constantly pushing the boundaries of conventional artistic mediums, addressing cutting-edge technology like biotech, artificial intelligence, and digital fabrication. Her thought-provoking work challenges our perceptions of our bodies and our environment and the definition of art itself. So Amy has shown work in 54 international exhibitions, including at the Smithsonian, Ars Electronica, and the Beijing Media Arts Biennale. And she was also honored as one of BBC's 100 most inspiring and influential women. And she's been named one of the most influential women in 3D printing. She was also an artist diplomat through the US Department of State, where she used art and technology to support social innovation, women's empowerment, and cross-disciplinary collaboration to address social issues. So her work has the power to inspire and reshape our understanding of the creative possibilities that emerge when art and technology are combined. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Amy. Welcome, Amy. We're really happy to have you here.
It looks like we're all set. Thank you for having me here today.
Right.
Technology is advancing faster than we can conceive of its impacts on humanity and evolution. This fusion of machines, data, biological systems, it's transforming our lives in ways that we really can't comprehend and are very hard to imagine. It's nonetheless reshaping our world on a daily basis. It's reshaping us physically and it's reshaping us emotionally. I mean, we could just look at how often that we use our phones in a day or interact with social media. This is influencing our thought on a daily basis. But we often really don't consciously think about or realize the impacts of this until we're living through it. It's an absolutely amazing time, though. We have the tools to create almost anything that we can imagine, and also things that we can't fathom yet. We have the technology to be able to save lives, but on the other hand, we don't really understand the implications of tampering with nature or what will happen to our planet or our species as we do. I explore the range and impacts of this, from dangers to possibilities, and through my work, I investigate the potential impact of emerging and exponential technologies such as AI and biotech on humanity, on our future, and on evolution. I approach these questions by using the very technologies that are in question, that I'm asking these questions about, to research and create art and design. This helps me to really ask better questions to help understand some of these implications and the potentials of these tools, because as I'm using them, the questions arise in the process. And my intention is in that in creating the work, I'm pushing the vision forward, the technology, and the path forward to a healthier, more enlightened future. I work across many disciplines and tool sets, and as our technology progresses and our tech tools progress, these categories unify more and more. They used to be very separate, but now, garments and wearables are much more involved. They're becoming much more one, simple devices that we can just put on as headsets. Infotech and biotech are coming together even more, AI and infotech, of course. So there's this cross-pollination that's happening now, that these categories are not so separate. My work can really be seen as artifacts of a speculative future where digital, physical, and biological systems merge, because I'm envisioning this future and I'm working through these tools and technologies and workflows to help us get to that future. And so these artifacts tell that story. And I almost always use the body in my work because it's our way of knowing the world. It's our way of experiencing and living through the world. And my work can be really technical, but it's also very personal. I was born with a life-threatening birth condition, and I had a number of experimental surgeries until one worked when I was a teenager. And this process first off, really made me interested in medical futuring and the latest technology in healing and enhancing the body, because I just wanted to be like other kids. I just wanted to heal it. But also growing up with this made me very aware of the human condition because of the body. You know, many people don't have to confront these kinds of issues until they're much older and they encounter illness or a loved one passes away, or if they feel like they were born into a body that's a mismatch between their identity. And I had to really confront these issues since I knew how to think about them, since I was born. My hope with using emerging and exponential technologies and new media ultimately lies in this positive transformation, especially when it comes to empowering and enhancing our health and our bodies, our well-being, and our future. Like, I really have a positive perspective about it ultimately. And as the body and technology comes together, the impact on our lives and on our future becomes even more pronounced. And this really makes it crucial for us to be proactive in shaping our technological landscape, right? To understand how we're not only using these tools, but this technology is actually shaping us, because there's a very important relationship there. It's not just something that's happening to us and that we're at the mercy of. We actually have the power to reshape our tools, but we have to be conscious of it. We have to be conscious how we use them and how we design them. These are garments that I made that are based on anatomy, the internal organs and different systems of the human body, and the representation of anatomical systems in visual forms. I grew up with one of those encyclopedias with the overlays of anatomical systems, and I was thinking about that. The process that I used to create these is now used to make scoliosis braces and lightweight, breathable 3D printed casts. So it's actually technically reshaping our bodies too. It's not just like the technology is somehow shaping our bodies, like the actual output physically reshapes us and helps us heal. And so working in these kind of methods, this body-based research and using these tools that could potentially be used for healing and enhancing the body, it not only reveals opportunities, but it also reveals like this whole slew of ethical and biological questions as well. So this is actually a way that I work as a bioethicist, because this is my method to be aware of, to present these questions, to start to come up with some of these very dense bioethical questions. And my journey as an artist is really all about questions. Questions about life, questions about identity, questions about the limitations of body, and the potential of humanity. What we can create and who we can become that's never been possible before, and how we can use our technologies to help us get there. My methodology is that I'm always trying to push the boundaries of the imaginable. How do I reveal new potentials, like to myself, things that I couldn't think of before? How can I use this new media, these new emerging technologies, to make something that was never possible before, and open my mind to that, and hopefully inspire other people to open their minds to the potentials as well, to new opportunities. You know, I'm trying to use our tools in a way to make things that were never possible in any other way. Like when I'm 3D printing, I'm not going to 3D print a cup. I'm going to try to use that technology to make something that I just couldn't make in any other way. And that's really where the mind starts to open and we can start to grow. And ultimately, I'm working in the material realm to reveal the invisible, sometimes even spiritual questions, harnessing this power of art and technology to examine what it truly means to be human and what it means to be alive. And I use these digital and technological processes to create my work because it performs in a way that can mimic, help study, and reveal metrics of life. It can hold a mirror up to us, to who we are and to who we can become. And some of exploring what it means to be human and what it means to be alive is biological in nature. There's all these ways that we can measure what it means to be human from a scientific and technical sense, like if a heart is beating, if we're breathing. But I'm also interested in all these ways that we can't measure, this larger picture of what it means to be human and what it means to be alive. All these realms that are beyond what we can measure, this dynamic internal landscape that's happening inside of us all of the time, and all these other intelligences, how they very much make us human, even if we can't measure them, even if we can't describe them. I'm also delving into how technology might reflect or affect these dimensions of existence. So this piece here is an early piece in a series of durational biofeedback performance artworks where I laid on a table for a period of 5 to 8 hours while I was connected to different kinds of technologies, in this case, the Sandine image processor that's behind me, to output image and sound in real time. And I was showing that we all have this very internal, very dynamic internal landscape happening inside of us all the time, but sometimes in stillness is when we can see it the most. And I was using it through the lens of technology to represent that, that landscape. And I'm fascinated by these intelligences, I really am, that are beyond our understanding. I'm even more than the biological, I think, because it's beyond our ways of knowing. It's beyond our, what we can have the study and knowledge of, beyond our language mind, and often beyond what we can replicate too. But we live through them. It's what makes us alive. And I'm asking questions about the impacts technology can have on us across all of these planes and intelligences, not just the scientific ones or the ones that we know how to measure. And diving into this raises a lot of questions about existence, about life, and it opens so many doors to contemplate and so many tools to explore. So many natural and synthetic intelligences, artificial intelligence being one of them. I believe that artificial intelligence is not just about the technological, but about the biological as well. With the development of our exponential technologies, including AI, machine learning, synthetic biology, genetics, robotics, implants, bionics, 3D printing, bioprinting, wet AI, this whole genre of merging of infotech and biotech, the concept of life has really been expanded. And I think we don't think about that, we don't talk about that enough, but it is expanding our concept of life and what's possible. Using these tools offers this completely unprecedented opportunity to potentially transcend life as we know it right now and actually reshape our bodies physically, reshape intelligent systems, reshape natural systems, reshape consciousness, creativity, and definitely this impacts our evolution. When we think about technology and artificial intelligence, a lot of people think about it as something outside of themselves, like a robot or a computer, a machine. But I'm focusing on how we can use our technology to integrate with us, to heal us and to empower us, like an artificial heart or a pacemaker. When you think about something like a pacemaker, I don't think, and you see somebody with it, you don't think of them as a cyborg. You see someone in front of you whose life has been saved, a partner, a grandparent, a child. But these are really highly technological devices, and they're implanted into the body. They can often communicate with a doctor's phone even, or their computer. And so this is the way that I'm looking at integrating these technologies with our bodies. In the Heart of Evolution, I explore the heart as both a vital organ and as the organ associated with deep emotional feeling of love, of joy, of sorrow. And I'm working with biomechanical and biofabricated sculptures to really question our spiritual evolution as we use biotechnology to advance our species. So as we work through these kinds of things for medical reasons, it's also altering us emotionally and in other ways that we probably aren't measuring if we're looking at it strictly for medical purposes. So in this case, I was looking at heart disease. Heart disease is a leading cause of death. I worked with cardiac surgeons and used what I learned from them to work through how the form and function of the heart's vasculature could be improved through generative engineering and generative design. So looking at the forces that are put on the heart and how we can spread this network so in the case of blockage, it wouldn't have such dire consequences. So this design could potentially improve function and reduce consequences. And I'm working towards bioprinting one of the versions in cardiac human cells that would actually be. And bioprinting vasculature has many benefits, not just for the heart, but also if we can bioprint vasculature, we're a step closer to making viable organs, which could have immense medical benefit. We can make replacement parts for people that need organ transplants, and as we age, we can get new organs as well. But then, of course, this raises huge questions about consequences of redesigning the body, ethical questions about who would be able to have these organs, who would have access to it. In America, it would be probably for the wealthy. What about rights to live and die in this space? If we can live a very long life or enhance our life and lengthen it by replacing out parts, what would be the meaning of life? What would make life worth living? And, what are rights to die, too, if we choose to do that and we don't want to live anymore because we're just now having this very prolonged life. And so, if we, back to the heart specifically, I was mentioning, it's associated with deep emotional feelings. So if we were to switch that out in some way or fabricate it in some way, what would the implications of that would be? How would we be changing ourselves? I was with my friend Lisa after she got a lung transplant, actually in Philly at the transplant house there. And I was talking to other people who had different transplants. They were all nationalities, different religions. And they all reported the same experience of feeling different. They didn't know who their donor was, but they felt like they could feel that person inside of them. So if we're to alter our organs, who would we become? Physically, we can answer that maybe a little bit easier, in an easier way. But emotionally, or even spiritually, who would we be? What would the evolutionary impact on this be on our species, on humanity? So the technical process of this work could be really complex, but it's not complex compared to the spiritual and philosophical and ethical questions that arise when doing this kind of work. This is another piece of mine, Regenerative Reliquary. It's made of biodegradable 3D printed scaffolds for stem cell culture into bone, installed in a bioreactor. Medically, this piece considers people who need bone grafts, transplants, and even those with limb differences. It was designed with the idea that we can make replacement parts specifically molded for a patient and modeled to fit them, and then grow along a scaffold that would dissolve their own stem cells. So this would potentially greatly reduce the risk of rejection if it were implanted. It would reduce the time on the table. Of course, this is made speculatively as a piece of artwork, but I'm asking all of these questions and I'm using those actual technologies in the process that could be used for that workflow. And to make a note about this piece too, I had to collaborate with so many people, with scientists and technologists. Autodesk supported creating this work. And most of my works require a great deal of collaboration, not only with the people and technologies, but also in this case with the living systems, with the cells. I really had to learn from the cells and let them teach me. How do they grow? How do they work? And there was benefits that came across all fields for this as well. Today, it's the largest 3D printed scaffold known to be made for stem cell culture. And that came about because as an artist, I wanted something that was uniquely recognizable as human. When you're to come on this piece in a museum or wherever you get to see this work, if you're looking at a piece of bone, a hand or a skull is the thing that's most immediately recognizable as human. I wanted to represent the impact of biotechnologies on humanity. And so I needed to have something that was human scale. And that hadn't been done before. Usually scientists work on a very small scale in a lab, like a few millimeters or less. And so it actually, the artwork pushed the science and technology forward. We had to develop new materials that wouldn't time out. We had to develop new 3D printing processes. So it really made innovations across all of our fields. And my hope is that it also inspires the medical field to progress along this work as well. This work really imagines the possibilities of using living cells to create things for both inside and outside of the body. And this is, to me, when things get really interesting. To consider that we can work with this intelligence of life and couple it with our technology to create something that's unlike anything that we've ever been able to create before. I can envision this kind of factory of the future where just a few cells are the basis for an entire workflow to create all kinds of different things. But it wouldn't have to be the same thing over and over. It could be various replacement parts, as well as new enhancements that are unlike anything that we naturally have. We can also grow things for outside of the body, like what if our technology was made out of reprogrammable cells, and what if they were decentralized? So this might seem like really far off, but at a certain point, we're going to hit our tech limits of machines and what the capacity is that they can have, especially when we get into quantum computing. The next level from that is biological interfaces. Something like DNA can hold so much more information than some of our top computers. So, then what if we were to make this kind of techno-infused, bio-enhanced cells? And what if they were to be implanted back into us and communicate with both our internal systems and the outside world? So, we're at this exciting time, like on a very basic level, just where we can grow things. We don't need inanimate objects like wood or, well, wood's not inanimate, but like metal to make creations. We can now use cells, the actual building blocks of life. But what are the implications of that? We can create things that have never been possible to make before, and we can now heal and enhance and empower us in ways that were never possible before. But we have to be really careful with this, and we have to consider there's implications that we just can't understand, and approach it with a lot of care and respect. When I was making this piece, the scientists suggested that we used bone cancer cells because ultimately we used stem cells from a live donor. But the cancer cells are much more robust, and they can grow on the scaffold much easier than the stem cells. So if the cancer cells wouldn't make it, then we know the stem cells wouldn't make it. And I immediately had this reaction of like, no way. My mother was a biochemist and a pharmacist, and I grew up in the lab with her, and she died of cancer. So whenever I make this kind of work, I just feel her very close to me. And having the idea of using cancer cells just made me like immediately like a little bit repulsed, but I trust everybody I work with. So I went home and I thought about that, and I kind of switched my thinking to think, what if I had my mom's cancer cells, and what if I can use those to grow on this piece? What does that mean for life and post-life and living on after death? It's not the same as having my mother in front of me at all. It's kind of like the HeLa cells. And so it brings up all these really interesting and important questions that we need to ask as part of this process. Man-made changes can occur much faster than nature, and I'm really concerned about its impacts on our future. A lot of times these things are done without that consideration. These sculptures are as a collaboration with the Smithsonian based on data from a triceratops and research in scientific de-extinction, which is scientists are actually doing. And that's really crazy to me and amazing, but also very scary. So this work looks back into the deep time of like dinosaurs, and then also tries to project into the far future. And I'm studying the potential consequences of using our biotechnology to bring back extinct species in new forms through this long view of time. I used a combination of basic evolutionary machine learning and computer-aided design to create these different morphologies, stopping at different points of what different outcomes could potentially be. And, I'm concerned with this evolution that natural selection never designed. We're headed there at exponential rates. So it's really important to focus on who we want to become and how we can use our technology to help us get there. I can easily envision a future where AI empowers and enhances our lives, a future where highly autonomous integrated systems surpass human intelligence across a number of domains, where AI becomes enmeshed in our bodies, in our beings, in the world around us, where we can't even tell the difference. Brain-computer interfaces, neurotech, being able to access all the information on the internet and beyond, and other sources with wearables and implantables on our brain and body. This offers really amazing opportunities. So this is some work I did with easy-to-use neuro headsets, just like the gaming headsets. In particular here, what I was doing was I was teaching myself to be more musically inclined, and it worked. I never really saw myself as a musical person, and I wanted to be more musically inclined. So over the period of 2 weeks in a residence at Signal Culture, I interfaced, I used a digital interface to put different brain waves through to image and sound. And while I was in the studio full time, I'm listening to this all the time, I'm taking it in. And then I noticed when I went out into the real world, I started hearing sounds in the world around me, like a jazz song in the garbage truck or music in the birds. And then I started dreaming in sounds, and I never had that experience before, ever. So I actually used my own brain through a tech and art interface to teach myself how to be more musically inclined. And this is a really amazing and positive use case, right? Here's some of the output. I love this. I think it looks like DNA gel staining. I think it's really beautiful. And, so while I'm doing this, I'm also like feeling happy and excited about it as well, which I think helps us learn better. So I think this, really opens amazing opportunities for learning, for understanding. And I can even think about training ourselves, like going into states of knowing beyond the human experience. Like, what if we can tap into seeing like a bug or feeling like a dolphin and using these technologies to be able to see that way? How would that change and enhance us as humans? How could that make us more empathetic and more understanding, more intelligent? One of my favorite uses of things like this is Don Cafe in Japan. In Japan, there's um, there's this cafe where robots serve you, but who's behind those robots are people who are bedridden, paraplegic, quadriplegic, couldn't otherwise get out of their bed, but through neural interfaces, they actually control robots. So now they have an opportunity to earn a living income, to interact with people, and that's a really beautiful use. That one that I like feel very inspired and excited about. And now scientists can read thoughts and text into image via generative AI. So you can use these simple neural headsets. They don't even need to be now implanted into the brain. They can use an AI interface, very much like how we use ChatGPT or some of the image generators, and output text and sound. And actually, even just this morning, I saw a research study where brain scans can read what song you're singing in your mind. So this is really interesting for use cases like Don Cafe, but it also brings up really important questions like the rights to our thoughts. What if you have this constant flow of information and stimulation into our brain? Just that coming into us all the time. We already have a glimpse of that from the internet. It's super overwhelming. It's hard to understand. It's hard to know what images are real anymore. So if that's like constantly coming into you, how do you even differentiate what's real, what's not real? How can you tell what you're learning from, and is that how you want to be learning? Like in my case, I'm learning to be more musically inclined. There's nothing bad or wrong with that, but are we actually like learning what we want to learn, or are we being fed stuff that's scary or traumatic, or are our thoughts being shaped in ways that we want or not? um, and so then like ownership of that too, right? Who owns thought output? If we're wearing neuro headsets and we're thinking something, and one company owns the neural headsets, one company is making biointerfaces, another company is creating these AI interfaces, and then you have this whole corpus of information and text that's, the basis for a textual output. Our artists who created reference images that are creating the visual output. Of course, the visual and output or textural output of what we're thinking can be recorded. So if you're thinking something through a neural headset with an AI interface and it's coming out to text, it's coming out to image, that can all be recorded. So in this process, who owns that output? It's probably not the original thinker. So who has rights to our thoughts? These are some of the important questions that kind of seem far out there. But I'm really thinking about how do we retain our cognitive rights and ownership, and how it impacts us. I mentioned overwhelm. There's these unintended consequences of our technology, of dividing our attention, of giving us decision fatigue. And if you work in generative AI, you know that it produces far faster than we can edit through it, and that leads us actually to making not such good decisions. So if we have like 1,000 images to go through, we get too tired from that. It's hard for humans to keep up with that. So that's like one of the big unintentional consequences of how tech negatively impacts us that we need to be aware of. Also, the majority of these generative AI models, as we're commonly using them, use verbal language as the basis, right? We have a text input, sometimes we have a text output or a visual output, but we're communicating through text. They're labeled through text. But, for me, I'm a visual communicator. I'm an artist. I'm actually much better and much stronger at communicating visually, surpassing that verbal realm. As an artist, I'm working from areas that are not of the language thinking mind. So now all of a sudden I have to put my thoughts through a language thinking process. And what do I lose in that process? I'm actually really concerned about that. When we tag it with language, like this was a tag of Regenerative Reliquary, which is a very complex piece. I didn't even really talk about all the emotional aspects and personal stories involved in it. But when we tag things with language, we can reduce it down or diminish it. And even with much more advanced models, the information that's being drawn from is from the past. It's pre-trained. So there's this danger of homogenization of thinking that can occur, right? It's drawing from the same data set. Even if it's a big data set, it can make us all think alike because it's all the same information that it's giving us, and it's not new. So when we lean on AI too much, it could disable our critical thinking skills. It could disable our creativity. Think about people like doctors, musicians, sculptors, right? We're being taken off of touching the body. We're being taken off musical instruments. We're being taken off clay, and we're being put behind screens. So we're becoming homogenized that way, right? And what do we lose in that process? These are people who are very kinesthetically intelligent, and intelligent in other ways that are not behind this 0-1 language processing mind, right? It's not, when a doctor touches the patient, it's not something flowing through a language thinking region to feel if you have a tumor. Likewise with a sculptor or a musician. So we may become much better verbal thinkers and communicators as we hone our prompt craft, but what about all these other intelligences? How do we continue to nurture and grow them, right? So, and I want to bring this up because I do notice, like even for myself too, I've become a much better verbal thinker and communicator. I've become much better at honing down on the specific ask. I've become better at actually being a boss that way too, a manager, and like being able to say what I want someone to do because I've been able to hone that down through my prompt craft. But again, how do we not just focus in on that region of verbal thinking mind, of being focused down that thought path to the exclusion of growing everything else? How do we live through our multiple intelligences and through multiple technologies? How do we continue to grow and thrive in that way? You know, we need to have awareness about how these tools, what these tools are and how they impact us, how they shape us, not just what we're using to make them with, but how they shape us, and use the tools in the proper perspective. And if we need to do something differently with the way we're using them, or we need to design them differently for different outcomes, then we need to put our energy towards that. And across any field, we can use AI as a creative tool, not as a be-all end-all, but we can use it in many ways to help generate ideas, to create new types of work that wouldn't be possible without AI, to foster innovation and push the boundaries of what's possible. I mean, these are some of the ways that I've used it. You can see this more on my website, you know, for bio design, for bio AI, for generative structures, for bioprinted and calcified bone, machine learning for evolutionary design, biomimetic architectures, artificial neural networking for healthcare, generative garment design with biosensor integration, of course, AI art and interactive AI art, AI-assisted emotion mapping, AI-assisted biosubstrates. It goes on and on. We can apply AI really to any field. It can augment our ability to solve problems, from curing diseases to addressing climate change. But we also need to be mindful of the potential pitfalls always, right? You hear me talk about both, including this loss of cultural and linguistic diversity, or the potential for unauthorized access or manipulation of our thoughts and experiences, including our creativity. So for me, I like to look at, and a solution that I share with you as well, is that I like to look at new tools and I ask, how can I use this tool to create something that was never possible before, to assist me, and to create in a way that I couldn't make in any other way. And it really, really opens the mind to be creative with the tools, and for it not to just be a be-all end-all, like, hey, I made an image, it's done. Where can I take it from there? In art and design specifically, it creates new aesthetics, so that's really exciting. But I also use it as a generative tool to iterate, to ideate faster, to help me sketch, to help me come up with ideas that I wouldn't think of in other ways. And then, maybe I'll use it as the final creation, or maybe it's just the starting point, right? Maybe this is just a sketch that then I can make a garment from in real life, or maybe I can make a pattern that then I can laser cut. And that's a really exciting thing to think about it as a tool in the process. And it's important, to ask, are we using this tool as a way of enhancing us, to help us learn and grow and be better versions of ourselves? Or are we using it as a crutch? Are we depending on it? Like, once in a while, if GPT goes down, it's like the world ends and people don't know what to do. And I mean, that doesn't really cut it. That means we're using it as a crutch. Are we stopping there? Are we losing creativity if we're focusing on it too much? Are we depending on it too much? Or, is it honing us in on a certain way of thinking? Or are we using it to help us grow and be more creative? So I like to be focused on that and always be asking, is this helping me be more creative? And if not, how do I use it that way? And I also really like the new aesthetics, right? How do we use those aesthetics to help tell the story? So some people might look at this and be like, oh, it's AI art. Well, yeah, exactly. It's a very specific moment in time of AI blowing up into art and design, blowing up into changing our bodies and our beings and how we interact with the world and how we translate our bodies into these digital spaces. So it's part of the story. And, looking at it to see the aesthetics, and the aesthetics are really evident in the text and image, right? When you're looking at AI art, a lot of times, when you're looking at like a GPT generated text if you do it enough. But the tool doesn't just shape the output, it shapes us, it shapes our thinking. So we have to be really mindful of this. When we're reading these stories back to ourselves, is that the way that we want to communicate? Or do we want to do something different? And so for me, most of the innovations and creativity occur working through this process. I use new media, emerging and exponential technologies, because as we use these new tools and create new experiments, we really grow and evolve through the technology in a co-dynamic way. We find new ways of looking at the world. We create new artifacts and new aesthetics. Using new media and exponential and emerging technologies opens our minds to think about new possibilities of what we could create and create things that we've never seemed possible before. It offers us the opportunity not only to reshape our lives and our bodies and our world, but also to really reshape our thinking, reshape our brains, our thought processes, and the way that we look at the world just by using it. We actually learn to think in different ways. Our brains change and develop when we use these tools, and then we further develop the tools in our vision. As we enter the hybrid age, technology will shape us as much as we shape it. We have to stop and ask ourselves, are we programming our lives in the direction that we want them to grow? Are we using our tools and technologies to help us get there? Or is it debilitating us? The future is not a place that we go. It's not just some place that we end up. It's a place that we actually have the opportunity to create. And we're always creating it if we're aware of it or not. Art can present these various scenarios of how we can use our exponential technologies and new media to alter our bodies and our beings, to interact with these various mechanical, digital, and synthetic intelligences. And we can share this wide range of scenarios through illustrating and illuminating this from, total doomsday scenario to an enlightened singularity. But ultimately, it's up to us, and it's on us on how we choose to use it. What is the future that we want, and how do we use our tools to help us get there? What are the stories we're telling? Is that helping us get there? We have to consider, how do we want to evolve? I can envision this future where AI is not just a tool, but it's a partner in our journey of creating the world that we want. Together with awareness, of course, we need to have a lot of awareness. Humans and AI can co-create, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, making and doing things that have never been possible before, to co-create a healthier world and a future. For me, I'm questioning evolution through wearables, garments and skins, implants, biofabricated and biomechanical sculptures, really looking at this interface between physical and digital, and how we'll live in other spaces too, like online and in the metaverse. My goal is to continue to investigate, exploring what life will look like in the future, and how our bodies and our beings and the natural world can interface with technology. And in that space, what life means. What life means in a post-biological world when we're merged with technology and transcend our current limitations. How will we embody ourselves into a machine or show up in a virtual world? Who will we become when our bodies merge with biotechnology and AI? What are our rights to live or die in this space, especially when we consider the massive digital footprint that we leave after we die? Who's going to tend to that? And how will that data be used, especially when there's a lot of medical data on us or DNA information? I'm considering this really wide range of what will happen to our bodies and our beings as we integrate further into these spaces, and what's left after we pass away physically, but what's left digitally. And this is an area where boundaries of what's artificial become really blurry. I mean, there's people that I see on Facebook who have legacy accounts because they passed away, but I haven't seen them in real life in a number of years. And it's actually really hard to tell if they are still alive or if they've passed away. So there's a lot of realms where the boundaries of what's artificial become really blurry and confusing. But ultimately, I think we'll look back at this time in history and recognize it as a new chapter to be able to create things that we've only dreamt of before and to be able to recreate ourselves in ways that were never possible before. The time in our evolutionary process is humans and technology merging, and it's something that to be very aware of as we engage with our tools. And my vision and hope is one where AI revolutionizes our understandings of ourselves and our world around us. To ensure a future where AI really benefits humanity in the future, we need to focus on the values of who we want to become and develop and use our tools to help us get there. And it's fundamentally important that we collaborate with other people, other disciplines, and other institutions, other fields who ask really different questions than us and look at the world in different ways. And also to collaborate with the underlying natural and living systems who most often offer the most elegant blueprint for sustainable, intelligent ways to proceed, right? It's an intelligence way beyond what we can name or what our artificial intelligence can describe. The challenges and opportunities that we face in this merging of bio and tech require a cross-pollination of ideas across all these disciplines. We really have to foster the spaces for dialogue and collaboration across artists, scientists, technologies, policymakers, tool shapers, and makers. You know, these collaborations can not only generate new ideas and innovations, but working together, I think we can do better to ensure that ethical issues are brought up and that we ask these really fundamental, important questions at the onset instead of looking at it at the end and saying, oops, what happened? We need to have an equitable development of our biodigital future. It's that simple. We need to ask these questions. In an era where the boundaries between the physical and digital are dissolving and where infotech and biotech are converging, our technologies really not only offer us a window to our inherent potential, but they're also a mirror reflecting back to us our collective issues and our aspirations. You know, is it reflecting what you want to see is an important question. We stand on the brink of this new phase of evolution where humans aren't just merely using technology, but we're embodying it, where technology will shape us as much as we shape it. And this path forward is really uncharted. It's filled with dangers and possibilities too. But the future isn't something that it has to happen to us. It's something that we have the opportunity to design and co-create. As our biotechnologies advance, we don't need to lose our humanity through this. In fact, we have this incredible opportunity to discover profound new dimensions of what it means to be human and use our technologies to exceed our potential in ways that were never possible before. It's the opportunity for a revolution, a new evolution, and even the opportunity for a new renaissance if we choose to use it that way. So thank you for joining me. I look forward to continuing the dialogue and engaging questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. Your work is beautiful and your words are beautiful. And I love your really positive outlook on the future and of this technology. We can go ahead and open it up for questions. Feel free to type any questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, please feel free to do so. I have a quick question. So, you know, the process of creating art is very personal and expressive. Do you think that the use of AI in creative processes can in any way dilute or enhance the emotional connection that people have with their own work or with their audience or with the whole creation process?
Yes, both. Right, all of the above. Totally.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, that's why I feel like I really reinforce, how do we use these tools, right? All of our tools are an option or like a way to connect or disconnect, but we see that more and more with our tech tools. So I was actually traditionally trained as a sculptor, as a ceramic artist, and maybe you can kind of see some of that in form and function and material science. But you know, that's a different kind of tool, and we have this kind of potter in the woods thinking of like somebody can go off and hide and, you know, be in their cave. And we can do that with our technology, but we can also use it to bring us closer too. So I'm actually like looking at how we can do that to bring us closer. If we both have neuro headsets on, how can we engage with other people or thinking? So that's very, you know, that's really connecting. But there's other ways to connect too. And as far as like diluting our artistic sensibilities or enhancing them, that really comes with developing a voice. So, you know, I am someone who always encourage myself and others to like, don't use an artist name when you're prompting. Like try to develop your own unique voice. And I've had this interesting experience with people who have made fan art for me, which I really appreciate. And I can see how they're using AI and prompting it to look like my artwork. And it's not something I would make, but I see how it's like referencing me. What I'm more interested in is when somebody tries to develop their own style through those tools. So it's interesting, like when you see my generative AI work, it doesn't look that much different than my sculptures or my other work too, before we even have like generative AI on the scene. Because I'm thinking the same way, I'm asking the same kind of questions across all these different tool sets.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and you definitely do have your own aesthetic through your AI work as well, and it's really beautiful, and you can tell you've really developed your prompt skills. So Hugo asks a question in the chat. It's very interesting how you portray the fundamental energies of life through your artworks, especially in Resonation from 2015 and Biofeedback from 2011. I'm intrigued by the way you capture and express the vital essences in these artistic creations. Could you share more about the meaning behind these artworks or how you manage to convey these energies through your art?
Yes. I think, you know, first off, in American culture, I don't talk about the spiritual aspects as much as I do in some other cultures, like in Japan, where the heart piece was first shown. That was a really important piece to be shown in Japan, and it was commissioned by the Mori Art Museum, because in Japan they're very technologically advanced, but they are a society that was early on with transplants and now kind of steer away from them because they thought the first person who had a heart transplant actually wasn't dead. And their culture has this way of talking about spirits and ghosts in a way that ours doesn't. And I'm really like honing in on that. But again, that's like not an area of language either. And some of my artwork, I was raised Catholic, and that's really reflected in some of my artwork too. So we have like not only spirituality, but religious aspects as well. Like when you look at Regenerative Reliquary, that's a direct reflection of some of these notions that I was raised with, of going to holy sites and seeing relics, like dead saints' hands, totally gross. And they're supposed to have this mystic agency to heal people, but they're dead. And to me, the real spiritual question in that, the one that religion is trying to answer, and science and art, like we're all trying to get at, what is this mystery of life, right? That is the true awe and wonder. So I was trying to kind of flip that script of relics and say, look at, this is the true mystery and awe and wonder. So in that realm, you know, I could get into some of the religious aspects, but really it is more a spiritual question that transcends religion of, you know, what is this awe and mystery of life that we haven't been able to describe, that religious persons, philosophers, scientists, like we're all trying to understand, how do I show that in my artwork in you know, an emotional way that we can kind of all tune into and all understand in some way without getting involved in some of those harder to understand discussions or complex discussions. But you were asking specifically about some of the biofeedback works, and this is where my body is personally a vessel, right? We have resonation and biofeedback art, which I both showed in here. So here I'm really showing like myself and my own process, and a lot of that had to do with the healing journey that I was on, where I had different health issues. My mother died of ovarian cancer. I mentioned her in the talk. And after that, I didn't get my period for 10 years. And no doctor could tell me why or fix it. And I really had to learn how to meditate and go into my body and resolve some of these mind-body issues. So yes, that's a very personal story, but it's something that humans have been doing for a very long time. And And there's this dissociation that happens with the body, or a coming back to like the body and self that could be very healing. So even though my journey was very personal, I reflected that through this, I reflected that through these meditations. And then during the meditations, you know, I have this technology that helps me to reflect it and represent it in a different way. So even though there was like a video or sound output that I recorded and was experimental artwork, really the artwork itself was the performance. And I had people tell me that came to the space, if they came at the beginning and came at the end, like they could feel a palpable change in the atmosphere and in the environment. And I think that is actually very spiritual, like that's a spiritual transformation there. So it's hard to identify, how do I capture and express those vital essences that you're asking about in the artistic creations? I think it's more about trying. I'm trying through my creative process to understand these in some way. And it's not about language. Like, how do I share this experience that in some way we all have? Like, we all have these different experiences. And for you, it might not have been through health or meditation, but we all have at some point experiences with like understanding the limitations of the body, facing the human condition. Like, how do I express these fundamental truths? And that's where I feel like I truly work as an artist. It's harder to explain through words, and it's part of the process of trying. And it's, I mentioned in my talk, it's not about that it's about working. I don't necessarily have just inspiration and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to make a piece and make it this way. It's about showing up at a certain time and just being like, I'm going to show up and work right now. If I have inspiration or not, I'm just going to keep working. And it eventually comes out. It eventually comes through.
Thank you. Lee has a question. I would like to ask about your relationships with scientists, including funding distributions, credibility, and parity.
What's the question? Like, how,
Yeah.
how do you think about that?
Lee, go ahead and
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just really trying to say what the question would be about, but I'd like to ask it. Yeah, so you know, I also collaborate with a lot of scientists. I'm an artist, and I'm really well aware of the discrepancy between science funding and art funding in this world. If you know, I'm sure we could both show pie charts, but if people really had any idea, they would be just absolutely shocked. And here you are asking these really profound questions that are probably, taken as a whole, even more urgent than the development of the AI itself. You know, if we're not answering these questions, you know, I think a lot of bad things can happen. So it's really fundamental. I'm also sure that some of the scientists you've worked with have been really impressed with some of the thoughts that you're having and the ideas that you're coming up with. But you've got this kind of disparity, and it echoes through the culture of our collaborations. And you know, at the end of the day, they're probably not going to publish your ideas in their paper. So, what are your experiences about you know, in working in these collaborations in regards to these kind of imbalances, if you will?
Well, I can talk about the whole range of imbalances for sure. But I think, you know, big picture, it depends on how I work. So some of how I work is just, hey, I have an idea, who can help me work on it? Some of it is, I have this idea and who can help me work on it? And then I reach out to my network and I say, well, what tech companies are working on this? And that's actually how I found a long-term, it's a more quiet collaboration, but it's been going on for a while. HP Labs has been supporting my work, and they're a really nice partner to work with. But that came about because when I was making the heart project, I reached out to someone in my network who is really in tune with 3D printing for medical healthcare. And I said, you know, I want to work with a tech company that has some funding for these kind of projects that's in the Bay Area. And I had my whole list of like an ideal partner, and they were like, hey, I know who this is. So in that regard, finding different partners, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I usually kind of lean on the tech partners here because the funding is a little bit easier than applying for grants. There's pros and cons to both. But what I find mostly with asking these questions is that they don't mind I'm asking these questions. In fact, they kind of support me to ask those questions and even like send me to give talks or do conferences. But as an artist, I'm always at like arm's length. So if something were to go wrong, they could just say, oh, well, that's the artist project. That's not our actual technology. So it's like a double bonus for them, right? Like I can show what their technology can do. Like if I'm using HP Labs 3D printers, it could show what their 3D printers can do. But if it raises questions that are uncomfortable, they can just say, well, that's what the artist did with it. That's the artist project. And then it's really interesting with the funding too, because I think, some of these stories are helping scientists to get funding, like, and tech companies to get funding, because you could show what can happen with bioprinting in a way that we couldn't see before, in a faster way too. It's not taking 10 years to get the ideas out there. So it does enhance that funding, but it's a hard road. It's a hustle. It's a complete hustle for me all the time. And it's a lot has to do with the passion and determination of really wanting to make these projects and thinking it's really important that we talk about this and finding partners that are willing to engage and support that creation of that artwork. But it's a hard path. I don't know if did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. I like to hear what people in your position to choose to talk about. And I think the fact that you're, working with companies is an interesting angle. You're scientists and companies, which is something I haven't done as much. So that was very interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I just want to add to that too. It's actually like, I feel like it's really well embraced. A lot of these companies go into their technologies wanting to do good. Like even Facebook, we see the negative impacts of Facebook. At the beginning, they were just like, this is going to be great. This is going to change the world. It's going to connect the world. Like they're really gung-ho on like it being a good thing. And then at some point they realized it's not a good thing. Then what choices are you making, right? So we need people to ask these questions. We need artists and philosophers and people asking these questions. So if I can be in a position to ask those questions, I'm going to ask them, and I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions. And I find that people are really fascinated about it and they appreciate it. Like they get to actually think, right? A lot of, especially like when we look at the medical field and the scientific field, people went into it because they wanted to heal people. Like they want to make a healthier world or a healthier like bodies, healthier beings, healthier people. And sometimes they are forced to get far away from that because of a certain line of working. So if they have somebody asking these questions that are close to their heart, it can ignite a lot of good things.
Thank you. We had one last question in the chat. We'll just go ahead and do that one. I know it's already 6 o'clock. William, did you want to go ahead and ask your question? Or I can read it.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I did want to say I enjoyed your talk and really like your work.
Thank you.
I just find myself in a much more pessimistic and critical position with regards to AI and AI hype than I think you do. And I wonder whether there's scope for you to be more critical whilst retaining some of the optimism that you have about the future, which is also really appealing. But I do think there is a danger in AI that's not what we hear from in terms of AI hype, in terms of AGI, general intelligence, that type of thing. I think it's more in terms of something like what Cory Doctorow would talk about in the general intuitification of our lives through big tech companies. So I wonder if you could respond to that.
Yes. Well, first of all, I really agree with you. And something I didn't talk about today was part of my work is we see the public facing work, my artwork, my talks. So when I make my artwork, I'm asking these questions, I'm working through the tools. It brings up all of these important and fundamental questions. It brings a lot of questions up that I didn't think of without working through it. Then I can talk about it. Now that I talk about it and I can see that there's these problems, what do we do about it? So part of my work behind the scenes is working with companies and policy shapers as much as possible to try to make an environment that makes a healthier situation for us, because I'm very concerned too. I want to look at this, that we're going to use these for our best and highest good, because the problem is the technology is here to stay. If we like it or not, it's here and it's impacting us. So from my position, I feel like, what can I do to say, hey, stop for a minute, Like, let's look at how this can impact us. Let's look at how this can impact our bodies and our beings when it is AGI, when it is super intelligence. Look at how dangerous that can be. How do we need to reshape our tools to make sure that that's the future that we want to see, that we have a future, that our, you know, future generations are around that can't even speak for themselves now. How do we think about it that far into the future? And in fact, yesterday I was at the Swiss consulate talking about that with the consulate general. And that's some of the diplomacy work that I do as well, of how do we ask these fundamental questions and really think about how we're going to shape our tools for a better future. And in that, it's because they're so dangerous, because there's so much negative potential that can come out of it. So that's not to say there's not still going to be bad actors. There will always be bad actors. There's always going to be people that are using these tools for war and bad causes. But if we can have more of a critical mass thinking about how we can use this for our well-being, or how we can redesign these tools to have a friendlier environmental impact, how we can use these tools to heal and enhance us. If we actually have people in positions of making the tools and in positions of power doing that, then we're working, at least know we're working towards a healthier and more sustainable future. Because right now I'm not confident that we are. And people that are, like small guys like me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your amazing work with us today. You know, your passion and ingenuity is really a true gift. So thanks for allowing us to learn more about your work and your process. And thank you everyone for coming out and participating.
Thank you everyone for coming. And feel free to reach out anytime as well through my website.
Yeah, I put Amy's website in the chat, our AI show, and you can also purchase some of Amy's prints at Chimaera. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.